Donald Trump as a chaos magic sigil, accident or design? Let's start with the core idea, stated plainly and then immediately set on fire. In chaos magic, a sigil is a symbol charged with intent, empowered not by logic or tradition, but by attention, belief, repetition, and emotional charge. It doesn't need to be understood. In fact, understanding can weaken it. The goal is for it to bypass conscious filters and lodge itself straight into the collective subconscious. Now imagine accidentally or deliberately creating the most powerful sigil of the modern media age, one that hijacks news cycles, bends institutions, provokes obsession, inspires devotion and revulsion, and cannot be ignored even by those who despise it. Now imagine naming that sigil Donald J. Trump, not as a man, as a symbol engine. Let's break it down piece by piece, like conspiracy theorists with a corkboard and too much coffee. 1. The name. Donald Trump as a verbal sigil. Say it out loud. Donald Trump. Hard consonants. Percussive. Almost comic booky. Donald comes from Domnall, world ruler. That alone is funny enough to feel cursed. Trump. A trump card overrides all others. It wins by definition. You don't argue with it. It ends the game. So every time the name is spoken, it semantically reinforces dominance. Open quote. Donald Trump literally reads as world ruler override. Close quote. But chaos magic doesn't care about etymology alone. It cares about phonetic impact. Trump sounds like a horn blast, a declaration, a bodily noise, which matters more than you think. Bass, physical, undeniable. It's impossible to say softly without irony. Try whispering Trump sincerely. You can't. The name demands projection. That's sigil behavior. And then there's the middle initial, hash, the J. Why does everyone say it? Nobody says Joseph R. Biden out loud all the time, but Donald J. Trump became ritualized. That floating initial acts like a magical spacer, a pause, a rhythm marker, almost like a drumbeat between syllables. Say it again slowly. Open quote, Donald J. Trump, close quotes. That matters. That matters. The logo, Trump in gold, tall and screaming. The Trump logo is aggressively simple. All caps, tall, narrow letters. Gold on black or white on black. No subtlety whatsoever. It looks less like branding and more like a royal stamp or a casino altar. Gold in occult symbolism represents the sun, authority, permanence, divine right, ego fully weaponized. But chaos magic flips symbolism on its head. It doesn't ask what gold traditionally means. It asks what gold triggers emotionally in a mass audience. Gold says, wealth without apology, power without explanation, success without justification. And the sheer lack of irony is the point. There's no wink, no self-awareness. It's maximalist confidence to the point of absurdity, which is perfect. A sigil that tries to be clever weakens itself. A sigil that doesn't care what you think feeds on your reaction either way. Love it? Energy. Hate it? Energy. Mock it? Still energy. You don't ignore it. The hair. A living glyph. Let's talk about the hair. Because you have to. It defies categorization. It's not a comb-over, it's not a pompadour, it's not a style anyone would rationally choose. It's a persistent anomaly. In magical terms, this matters a lot. The hair functions as a recognition trigger, a mimetic hook, a deliberate violation of aesthetic norms. It looks wrong. And because it looks wrong, your brain can't file it away as background. Chaos magic loves ugly persistence. That hair is a glyph that refuses normalization. No matter how many times you see it, it never becomes invisible. It keeps announcing itself. And here's the key part. Open quote, it survives ridicule. Close quote, mockery usually dissolves authority. But in this case, mockery reinforces it. Why? Because every joke repeats the image, reaffirms recognizability, keeps the sigil charged. The hair is a self-renewing spell component. Every late-night joke is just another candle lit at the altar. 4. The hand gestures. Mudras for television. Now we get into the good stuff. Trump's hand gestures are weirdly consistent. The pinched fingers, precision claw, the chopping motion, the pointing, the open-palmed shrug, the double-handed accordion squeeze. They are repetitive, exaggerated, and unmistakable. In Eastern mysticism, mudras are hand positions that direct energy and meaning. Chaos magic doesn't require formal mudras. It just needs repeated physical gestures tied to emotional states. Trump speaks with his hands like a street preacher who learned rhetoric from professional wrestling. And that's not an insult. It's perfect. Each gesture signals dominance, breaks conversational norms, forces visual focus, synchronizes speech and motion. Television loves motion. Cameras drink this stuff. Over time, the gestures become part of the sigil, subconsciously reinforcing. Open quote. This person is performing power. Close quote. Even when the words are incoherent, the body language keeps broadcasting certainty, and certainty is the fuel. 5. The voice, incantation, not argument. Trump doesn't speak like a debater. He speaks like someone casting a spell badly but loudly. Short phrases, repetition, superlatives, loops, believe me, tremendous, everybody knows. Many people are saying. These phrases do not convey information, they bypass it. In chaos magic, repetition replaces logic. The meaning is irrelevant, the rhythm is what embeds. He speaks in mantras designed for television, not for persuasion in a classical sense. The goal isn't to convince skeptics, it's to entrain attention. You don't remember the policy, you remember the vibe. That's sigil logic. 6. The feedback loop, the media as ritual circle. Here's where the accident or design question really starts to glow ominously. Because once the sigil is active, others begin maintaining it for you. News outlets, replay the name, replay the image, replay the gestures, replay the outrage. Late night comedy repeats it with mockery, which still feeds recognition, which still charges the symbol. Opponents speak the name constantly, frame everything around him, keep him at the center of narrative gravity. At that point, intent barely matters. Chaos magic doesn't care who is powering the spell, only that the circuit remains closed. Trump becomes a self-sustaining egregore, a thought form animated by attention itself. Number 7. Accident or design, the final turn of the knife. So was this deliberate? Here's the unsettling answer. It doesn't matter. Some of the strongest sigils in history weren't created by magicians. They were created by people who intuitively understood attention. Trump spent decades in tabloid culture, in branding, in wrestling-adjacent spectacle, in environments where outrage equals airtime. He learned, consciously or not, how to become unignorable. That's chaos magic without candles. That's spellcraft without belief. That's ritual without robes. A walking, talking sigil powered by the oldest magic of all. Open quote, human attention. Close quote. Closing image. Imagine a future historian mage flipping through old broadcasts and saying, open quote, they thought they were watching a man, but what they were really doing was feeding a symbol, and the symbol learned to walk. Close quote. And somewhere in the background, faint but unmistakable, a golden word flashes again. Trump. Still charged, still humming, still impossible to ignore. The Great Sigil War, as recorded in the ash-covered margins of the late American grimoire. The age before meaning broke. There was a time, so the archivists claim, when symbols still obeyed their makers. Words meant things. Logos sold products. Leaders represented ideas. This was the age of narrative control, when institutions still believed they steered attention instead of merely surviving it. And then the pressure built. Screens multiplied, signals overlapped, attention fractured into 1,000 glowing shards, meaning began to rot. That rot did not create chaos, it invited it. 2. The accidental sigil awakens. No one knows the exact moment it happened. Some say it was the first time his name appeared in gold taller than a man. Others say it was the hair incident, the photo that broke the aesthetic spell of seriousness forever. A few heretics insist it began when reality TV crossed the event horizon and learned to vote. But one thing is agreed upon. At some point, Donald Trump stopped being a man and became a symbol that could not be shut off. The conditions were perfect. A name that declared dominance, a visual form impossible to normalize, a voice that spoke in looping incantations, a media ecosystem that fed on outrage like oxygen. The sigil did not demand belief. It demanded attention, and attention it received. 3. The formation of the egregore. Chaos magicians call it an egregore, a thought entity sustained by collective focus. The Trump sigil fed on love, hatred, mockery, fear, obsession. Every chant of the name, whether screamed in adoration or spat in disgust, added charge. And something curious happened. The more people tried to destroy the sigil, the more defined it became. Attempts to negate it only sharpened its outline. You could not blur it. You could not ignore it. You could only circle it, like planets trapped in an attention well. That's when the others began to awaken. The counter-sigils rise. No sigil rules alone. In response, the old institutions, panicked, half asleep, clinging to dead rituals, began forging counter sigils. They were clean. They were rational. They were focus grouped. They were boring. Their names were things like stability, norms, decency, return to normal. These sigils were technically correct, which is why they failed. They required belief. They required trust. They required a population that still thought symbols worked the old way. Meanwhile, the Trump sigil required only reaction, and reaction was plentiful. V. The battlefield, the noosphere. The Great Sigil War did not occur on land or sea. It occurred in the noosphere, the psychic layer of reality where attention, meaning, and identity collide. Battlefields included cable news panels, ritual circles in suits, Twitter timelines, spell scrolls that rewrite themselves, memes, compressed sigils capable of viral possession, late-night monologues, mockery rituals that backfired spectacularly. Each replay of the sigil strengthened it. Each denunciation etched it deeper. The war was asymmetric. The counter sigils relied on coherence. The Trump sigil thrived on incoherence. The more chaotic the environment became, the more at home it felt. The revelation of the hair crown. Midway through the war, scholars noticed something disturbing. The hair, long mocked, endlessly analyzed, had begun to function as a crown glyph. Not a crown of legitimacy, a crown of recognition. Children could identify it instantly. Caricatures required only 3 strokes. Silhouettes alone carried the full charge. In mythic terms, the sigil had achieved iconographic compression, maximum recognizability with minimal detail. This is when some occultists realized, open quote, even if the man vanished, the symbol would remain. Close quote. That realization terrified everyone. The Sephon, the fracture of reality, consensus. As the war dragged on, reality itself began to split. Not cleanly, not politely. Different populations inhabited different symbolic universes, all broadcast through the same screens. In one world, the sigil was a trickster king, a chaos hero, a living rejection of elite narrative control. In another, the sigil was an anti-king, a contamination, a walking glitch in the moral code. Both fed it. Both needed it to explain why reality no longer made sense. The Trump sigil became a load-bearing myth. Remove it, and the story collapses. #8, the war's climax, when symbols ate the map. At the height of the war, something unprecedented happened. Symbols began acting faster than events. Narratives formed before facts. Reactions predated causes. Belief preceded observation. This is when the older magicians, those who remembered when politics was merely persuasion, quietly retreated. They knew the truth. Open quote. The war was already over. Attention had chosen its champion. Close quote. Not because it was good, not because it was right, but because it was indestructible under mockery. That is the highest tier of chaos magic. Aftermath, the age of autonomous sigils. The Great Sigil War did not end with victory. It ended with precedent. After Trump, everyone learned the wrong lesson. Be louder, be more outrageous, be more polarizing. But they missed the key ingredient. You cannot fake an egregore. You cannot manufacture inevitability. You cannot command attention into staying. The Trump sigil emerged from decades of cultural pressure, media evolution, and collective exhaustion. It was not summoned. It condensed. X, the final whisper. The last page of the grimoire is damaged. Only a fragment remains, written in the margin like a warning. Open quote. Beware the age when symbols no longer serve humans, but humans serve symbols, chanting names they swear they hate, feeding gods they insist aren't real. Close quote. And beneath it, scribbled later, in a different hand. Open quote. The next sigil will not look like a man at all. Close quote. If you want next we can, chronicle the second sigil war. Map the emerging post-Trump archetypes. Or go full cosmic horror and ask what happens when AI learns to generate egregores on purpose. Because trust me, this war, it was just the tutorial.